In the shadowed cradle of eternal night, where the moon's silver gaze pierces the veil of unseen worlds, a single heartbeat echoes louder than any roar. The wind howled through the jagged peaks of the Frostfang Mountains, carrying the bite of winter's unrelenting fury. Snowflakes danced like restless spirits, settling on the brittle branches of pine that clawed at the gray sky. Naraya moved through it all with the grace of one who had long ago surrendered to the dark, her bare feet tracing paths worn invisible to others. The pack's encampment lay behind her, a fading murmur of crackling fires and guttural laughs, but she felt its rejection like a fresh wound, raw and throbbing in her chest. She was Omega, the lowest of the low, born without the gift of sight that marked the worthy. From her first breath in the birthing den, the elders had whispered of curses, of the moon's disfavor. Useless, they called her, their voices a chorus of scorn that blended with the distant ooeves of wolves patrolling the borders. Naraya had learned to navigate by the earth's secrets, the crunch of frost underfoot, the metallic tang of blood from a fresh kill carried on the breeze, the subtle shift in air pressure when a predator or a packmate drew near. Intuition was her compass, scent her map, sound her unyielding guide. Yet none of it shielded her from the pack's disdain. Exile had come not as a dramatic banishment, but as a slow erosion, a deliberate abandonment. The Alpha, Thorn, had decreed it during the last full moon gathering, his voice booming like thunder over the assembled wolves. "She contributes nothing," he had snarled, his breath hot against her face as she knelt in the snow, head bowed. The pack had echoed him, their jeers rising like steam from the central fire pit. Naraya remembered the heat of that flame on her skin, the way it flickered in her mind's eye, not as light, but as a pulsing warmth that spoke of life she could never fully claim. They had stripped her of her meager duties. No longer would she mend hides by touch or listen for intruders at the edges. Instead, they left scraps at the periphery of the camp, just enough to stave off death, but never enough to foster belonging. Now, as she ventured deeper into the whispering woods that fringed the mountain's base, the cold seeped into her bones, a companion as familiar as her blindness. Her fingers brushed the rough bark of an ancient oak, its texture etched with the scars of storms long past. She paused, inhaling deeply. The sharp resin of evergreens mingled with the faint, earthy rot of fallen leaves buried under snow. Somewhere to her left, a stream gurgled, its voice a soothing counterpoint to the wind's lament. But beneath it all, she sensed the unrest. The pack's borders were fraying, whispers of invading forces from the southern realms slithering through the ranks like shadows. Naraya's hand drifted to her throat, where a faint ridge marred her skin. A birthmark, they said, shaped like a crescent moon kissed by blood. It had appeared the night she was born, under a lunar eclipse that the seers deemed an ill omen. She traced it now, feeling the subtle warmth it held, even in the chill. It was her secret talisman, a pulse that synced with the moon's cycles, though she dared not speak of it. In the pack's eyes, it was just another flaw, proof of her unworthiness. But in quiet moments like this, it hummed with something deeper, a vibration that let her glimpse truths hidden from sighted eyes. Not visions of form or color, but currents of intent, the flicker of deceit in a mate's promise, the undercurrent of fear in an alpha's command. It was her lunar perception, a gift veiled by her affliction, allowing her to see the heart's hidden landscapes. A low growl rumbled from the underbrush, freezing her in place. Her ears pricked, attuned to the cadence. Not a wild beast, but something larger, burdened. The scent hit her next. Musk and iron, laced with the sharp sting of fresh blood. Humanoid, yet primal. An alpha, wounded and alone. Her intuition flared, a warning not in her gut, but curiosity tempered the fear. The pack's exiles often wandered these woods, driven out for failures or betrayals, their howls a prelude to madness. She should flee, melt into the snow like a ghost. Yet the mark at her throat warmed, pulling her toward the sound, as if the moon itself urged her on. The figure emerged with a stumble, breath ragged, collapsing against the same oak she had touched moments before. Naraya's senses painted him in fragments, broad shoulders heaving under a cloak torn by thorns, the wet rasp of pain in his throat, the overwhelming aura of authority cracked by vulnerability. He was no mere outcast. Power clung to him like frost to stone, tempered by a guilt that tasted bitter on the wind. Who approaches? His voice was gravel and command, edged with exhaustion. Naraya stood still, her heart a drumbeat in the silence. The wind swirled around them, carrying flakes that melted on her lashes she could not see. Fear coiled in her belly, but so did an inexplicable draw, the first thread of connection in her isolated world. She could turn away, preserve the fragile sanctuary of her exile, or step closer into the unknown that smelled of blood and destiny. In that suspended breath, under the moon's watchful eye, Naraya chose to listen. The stranger's growl softened into a ragged exhale, the sound scraping against the frozen air like claws on ice. Naraya's pulse thrummed in her ears, a wild rhythm that drowned the wind's whisper for a moment. She tilted her head, drawing in his scent more deeply, salt of sweat, the coppery bloom of blood seeping through fabric, and beneath it a faint undernote of pine smoke, as if he carried the hearth of distant halls on his skin. It was not the feral reek of a lone wanderer gone mad. This was layered, regal, laced with the quiet authority of one who commanded storms, but now bent before their fury. "I am no threat," she said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her limbs. Words were her shield, woven from years of navigating scorn without sight. She took a cautious step forward, the snow yielding softly under her weight, releasing a faint crunch that echoed in the stillness. The mark at her throat pulsed warmer, a subtle beacon urging her closer, revealing flickers of his inner turmoil. Not malice, but a storm of regret, sharp as shattered glass. Guilt, heavy and unyielding, coiled around fragments of fierce loyalty. Who was he, this intruder in her solitude, whose pain sang to her like a half-forgotten lullaby? He shifted against the oak, bark groaning under his grip. "Stay back, Shadow Walker," he rasped, the words laced with a command that brooked no defiance, yet cracked at the edges with vulnerability. "The hunters are close. Their blades thirst for more than my blood." His breath hitched, and Naraya caught the wet seep of injury, a gash, deep and fresh, from the metallic tang that thickened the air. She froze, her intuition flaring like a torch in the dark. Hunters? Not the pack's patrols, whose steps she knew by their lazy arrogance. These were foreign, their pursuit a thunder she sensed on the horizon, vibrating through the earth. Fear prickled her skin, cold as the flakes melting on her cheeks, but curiosity rooted her in place. In the pack, she had been invisible, a ghost they tolerated until they did not. Here, in this fractured encounter, she felt seen, not by eyes, but by the raw necessity of survival. The moon above, though unseen, pressed its weight upon her, its silver essence threading through her veins, amplifying the truths his aura betrayed. He was no enemy to her, not yet. His intent flickered with a desperate need for aid, shadowed by the weight of secrets too vast for one soul to bear. A distant howl pierced the night, not the pack's familiar chorus, but a sharper, more organized baying, wolves from beyond the frost fangs, driven by orders from shadowed thrones. Naraya's heart clenched. The unrest she had sensed earlier, the fraying borders, now crystallized into peril. "Hunters from the south?" she murmured, piecing it from the wind's gossip, the way it carried alien scents of ash and iron. She extended a hand, palm up, toward the sound of his labored breathing. "Let me help. The stream is near. Its water runs clean, cold enough to staunch the bleed." He hesitated, the silence stretching taut as a bowstring. She felt his gaze upon her, heavy and assessing, though it pierced nothing she could not already perceive. "You are blind," he stated, not with pity, but a quiet wonder that bordered on recognition. His voice held the timbre of command tempered by loss, each word a stone dropped into still water. "Yet you move as if the night bends to your will. Who are you, to offer succor to a marked man?" "Nariah," she replied, the name slipping out like a confession. "Of the Frostfang pack, or what remains of my place in it." She did not elaborate on the exile, the jeers that still echoed in her mind like winter's echo. Instead, she stepped nearer, guided by the heat radiating from his form, a counterpoint to the encroaching chill. Her fingers brushed his cloak, rough wool sodden with melt and blood, and she recoiled slightly at the warmth of life ebbing beneath. Instinct warred with caution. This alpha's presence stirred something primal, a pull that denied logic. He was danger incarnate, yet his guilt mirrored her own quiet shame, forging an invisible thread between them. With a grunt, he allowed her guidance, leaning into her slight frame more than pride would admit. They moved together toward the stream's murmur, her arms steady under his weight, the snow muffling their path. Each step synced their breaths, ragged harmony in the lunar hush. The water's edge welcomed them with a crystalline rush, icy fingers lapping at the bank. Nariah knelt, tearing a strip from her own ragged hem, coarse linen that had once been a healer's cloth, now relegated to rags. She dipped it, the cold shocking her skin, and pressed it to his wound, high on his shoulder, where the scent of torn flesh was strongest. He hissed, muscles tensing like coiled springs. "Why?" The question hung between them, raw as the gash she tended. In his aura, denial flickered, instinct urging alliance, mind rebelling against reliance on an omega, blind and forsaken. Nariah felt it too, the instinctive draw clashing with her solitude's armor. Touching him revealed more, flashes of a crown forged in fire, brothers bound by blood, a realm teetering on betrayal's edge. Her mark burned now, sinking with his hidden scars, whispering of kin she had never known. "Because the moon demands it," she whispered, more to herself than him, as the howls grew nearer, a chorus of pursuit slicing the night. They were no longer strangers. Fear had woven them into reluctant guardians, empathy's first fragile bloom amid the gathering storm. In this refugio of rushing water and shadowed boughs, under the moon's unblinking vigil, Nariah bound his wound, their fates entwining like roots beneath the frost. The hunter's bay swelled, closing in, but for this breath they shared the silence, a bond born not of choice, but necessity's unyielding hand. And now, I invite you to leave a trace of your presence in the comments. Tell us where in the world you're watching from, and the exact hour you hear this story. We wish to know how far these northern confessions travel, and at what moments of the night they find you. The stream's icy murmur faded into a tense hush as Nariah pressed the makeshift bandage firmer against the alpha's wound. Her fingers slick with the chill of water and the warmth of his spilling life. His breath came in shallow gusts, syncing with the distant howls that clawed at the night's edge, drawing nearer like wolves, scenting weakness. She could feel the earth's subtle tremor under her knees, the vibration of paws pounding through snow-packed earth, a rhythm that spoke of organized fury rather than wild hunger. These were no stray beasts. They were leashed by command, their intent a dark thread woven through the wind, ambition laced with malice, the kind that toppled thrones for scraps of power. He tensed beneath her touch, his hand clamping over hers, calloused and unyielding, yet trembling with the effort to restrain pain. "Nariah," he echoed her name like a ward against the encroaching dark, his voice a low rumble that stirred the air between them. "You bind more than flesh. What sorcery is this, that an outcast tends a king's shadow?" The confession slipped from him unintended, heavy with the weight of crowns he could not shed. In the currents of his aura, she glimpsed fractured loyalties, a realm of jagged peaks and iron forges, brothers forged in the same fire that had scarred his soul. Guilt coiled there, thick as smoke from a dying pyre, born of choices that had sundered families long before this night. She withdrew her hand slowly, the metallic tang of blood lingering on her skin, mingling with the crisp bite of frost. "No sorcery," she murmured, her intuition threading through his turmoil like moonlight on water. "Only the moon's echo. It reveals what eyes betray." Her mark at the throat throbbed in response, a crimson crescent pulsing with shared rhythm, unveiling the truth he hid. The same birth sigil, etched not just on his flesh, but in his bloodline, binding him to her in ways the pack's scorn had blinded her to. Brother. The word hovered unspoken, a revelation too vast for this fragile sanctuary, stirring a storm of emotions she had long buried, abandonment's ache twisting into something fiercer, a longing for roots she had never claimed. The howls sharpened, splitting the air like splintered bone, now mere heartbeats away. Naraya rose, her senses mapping the terrain. The stream's bend to her right, offering a narrow cleft in the rock face where boulders huddled like ancient sentinels. The thicket of evergreens ahead, branches heavy with snow that could muffle their trail. "We cannot stay," she said, urgency threading her voice, though fear gnawed at her resolve. In the pack, she had been prey, evading blows and barbs through silence. Now this stranger, kin, drew her into the hunt. His peril a mirror to her own hidden fractures. Empathy bloomed unbidden, softening the edges of her isolation. His pain echoed hers, a shared exile beneath the indifferent moon. He pushed to his feet with a suppressed groan, his free hand grasping her elbow, not as command, but anchor. "Lead, then, the southern packs. They seek the mark, to sever what the Dusa wove." His words painted shadows in her mind. Rival alphas, hungry for the power of lunar bloodlines, viewing her kind as threats to be culled. Together, they slipped toward the cleft, his weight a steady pressure against her side, their steps synchronized in the snow's deceptive hush. The wind shifted, carrying the hunter's scent, acrid leather and oiled steel, overlaid with the foul undercurrent of betrayal. Naraya's heart pounded, each beat a drum in the silence, but his presence steadied her, a bulwark against the void she navigated alone. They wedged into the crevice, the rock's chill pressing close, damp moss yielding under their palms. She guided him deeper, her fingers tracing the uneven walls, feeling the faint drip of meltwater like tears from the mountain's stone heart. In this cramped refuge, breaths mingled, warm against the cold, and the bond deepened. Not through words, but the raw intimacy of survival. His aura enveloped her, layers peeling back, the melancholy of a king who had forsaken duty for a greater vow, the ethical core that refused to wield power as a blade. "I am Eric," he whispered at last, the name a key turning in her soul's lock. "First of the Iron Peak brothers, and you bear the sigil that damned us all." Naraya's breath caught, the revelation crashing like a wave. Iron Peak, whispers from the pack's elders, tales of 6 alpha kings scattered by war and curse, their bloodline a beacon for the moon's favor and enemies' wrath. Her brothers, lost to her at birth, deemed too weak in her blindness to claim. The mark burned now, a bridge across years of scorn, flooding her with flashes of their shared past. A mother's final howl under eclipse, the scattering of heirs to protect the line. Tears welled, unseen but felt, tracing hot paths down her cheeks. "Why come now?" she asked, voice fracturing, the question laced with the pain of abandonment's ghost. Empathy twisted into something profound, a vinculo forged in the crucible of peril. Not pity, but recognition, the quiet strength of souls who had endured alone. Eric's hand found hers in the dark, rough thumb brushing her knuckles, a gesture of quiet atonement. The threats converge. The southern lords sense the awakening. We 6, we seek to mend what was broken. Outside, The hunters prowled, their growls echoing off the rocks, boots crunching peril close. One snarled a command, voice thick with southern burr. The scent fades here. Tear the stones apart if need be. The prize is the marked one, blind or no. Naraya's intuition flared, reading their greed as a foul stain on the night. But Eric's grip tightened, his resolve a shield. In that moment, protection flowed both ways. Her perception warned of a flanking shadow to the left, and she pulled him aside just as claws scraped the crevice's mouth. They held still, hearts thundering in unison, the bond solidifying like frost to iron. The hunters passed, their frustration a fading snarl swallowed by the wind. Yet in the aftermath, Naraya faced the stirring within. This refuge was no mere pause, but a threshold. To embrace kin meant reclaiming power she had rejected, trading solitude's fragile peace for the storm of legacy. Eric's guilt mirrored her doubt, a shared melancholy under the moon's gaze. What was redemption, if not choosing connection amid the blood and cold? The night deepened, their breaths the only sound, as the first threads of family wove through the pain, promising trials yet to come. The crevice's chill wrapped around them like a shroud, the rock's unyielding embrace muffling the world's fury into a distant echo. Naraya's fingers still tingled from Eric's grip, the rough warmth of his palm a stark contrast to the damp stone that pressed against her back. The hunter's snarls had faded into the wind's mournful sigh, leaving only the drip of meltwater and their shared breaths to fill the void. Yet silence was no sanctuary. It amplified the storm within her, where abandonment's old scars twisted anew under the weight of his revelation. Brothers. The word echoed in her mind like a howl swallowed by snow, stirring a tide of doubt and fragile hope. How could blood bind what years of scorn had severed? Her mark throbbed at her throat, a crimson pulse syncing with the moon's unseen rhythm, urging truths she had always sensed but never named. Eirik shifted beside her, his presence a solid heat in the confined dark, his wound's metallic scent now dulled by the bandage's press. "The others come," he murmured, voice low as embers in ash, carrying the melancholy of a king who had wandered too long in exile's grip. "My brothers, our brothers, scent the convergence. The southern lord's blades hunger for the sigil's bearers, but they do not know its true heart lies in you." His aura unfolded to her intuition like a map etched in frost. Layers of guilt, etched deep from the night they were scattered. Infants torn from a mother's dying embrace to evade a curse woven by rival packs. He had risen as Iron Peak's first alpha, forging alliances in shadowed halls, yet each victory tasted of the loss he could not reclaim. Her, the blind sister deemed forfeit. Naraya's breath caught, the air thick with the earthy musk of moss and the faint, lingering bite of blood. She turned her face toward him. Those sightless eyes saw nothing of his form. Instead, her lunar perception bloomed, threading through his essence like silver roots seeking soil. Flashes came unbidden now, sharper than before. Not mere flickers of intent, but visions woven from emotion's raw weave. She glimpsed him as a boy, silver-haired and fierce, standing sentinel over cribs in a storm-lashed keep, his small hands tracing the crescent on her infant throat while thunder masked their mother's final plea. "Hide her," the queen had whispered, blood-staining snow-white furs, her intent a blaze of sacrificial love. Eric's guilt surged then, a torrent that drowned Naraya in its depth, the ethical torment of a leader who had obeyed, banishing her to the Frostfangs to shield the line, only to forge a throne on foundations of regret. The mark ignited, heat spreading like liquid fire through her veins, and the world tilted. Sounds sharpened to blades. The wind's howl became a chorus of ancestral voices, Wivando warnings from lunar temples long buried under ice. Scents layered into stories, the pine smoke on Eric's skin carrying whispers of iron forges where pacts were sealed in blood, The stream's rush revealing undercurrents of hidden caves where the Deusa's priestesses once communed with the night. Her gift, long veiled by the pack's mockery, unfurled fully now, a rare lunar perception that pierced veils of flesh and fate. She saw, not forms, but truths, the southern hunter's greed as a festering wound on the realm's spirit, pulsing with visions of sacked villages and shattered oaths. Eric's path, a labyrinth of choices where mercy had cost him allies, yet preserved his soul's unbowed core. You. Feel it, Eric breathed, his voice fracturing with awe, hand tightening on hers as if to anchor them both. In her unfolding aura, he sensed the shift, a key turning in destiny's lock. The sigil was no mere mark. It was the Deusa's thread, binding the six brothers' power, but incomplete without her. She, the blind Omega, held the clarity they lacked, the ability to discern betrayal's shadow from loyalty's light, to navigate the moral tempests that threatened their united front. Naraya, you are the Pathfinder, he said, the title emerging like a prophecy from forgotten scrolls, his melancholy lifting into quiet reverence. Born under eclipse to see what strength blinds us to. The threats rising, warlords allying under false moons, traitors in our own ranks. They converge because the bloodline awakens. But without your sight through the heart, we are but blades in the dark. The revelation crashed over her like an avalanche, snow's weight burying doubt beneath a surge of purpose. Yet it came laced with pain, the pack's jeers resurfacing as ghosts in the wind, useless, cursed, unworthy. Her fingers trembled against his, tracing the raised edge of his own sigil beneath his cloak, its warmth mirroring hers, a shared scar of separation. Intuition wove deeper, unveiling the destiny's crux. The brothers sought not just reunion, but redemption through her, to heal the fracture that had cursed their line with endless war. Irik's ethical core shone clearest now, a melancholic light refusing to claim power without her consent. His guilt, a vow to atone for the exile that had shaped her solitude. But freedom warred within her, a fierce undercurrent against the pull of lineage. To embrace this was to step from shadow into storm, trading the quiet dignity of survival for the burden of thrones and blood feuds. The moon pressed its will, its silver essence flooding her senses with visions of unity. 6 alphas circling a lunar altar, her voice guiding their choices amid flames and howls, forging peace from betrayal's ashes. Tears traced silent paths down her cheeks, hot against the crevices cold, as empathy bound them tighter. His redemption intertwined with hers, love not as reward, but proof of worth beyond sight or strength. Outside, the wind rose anew, carrying faint weavos from the peaks. Her other brothers, drawn by the sigil's call, their auras brushing the edges of her perception like distant stars aligning. Irik rose slowly, pulling her with him, his resolve a steady flame. The choice is yours, sister. Remain the ghost they made you, or claim the light you were born to wield. The rock parted to the night's embrace, snowflakes whispering against her skin, and Naraya stepped forth, her gift a beacon in the void. Yet as the howls neared, a deeper dilemma stirred. Could courage alone mend what blood had torn? Or would destiny demand a sacrifice she was not yet ready to give? Under the moon's unyielding gaze, the path forked, blood and fire awaiting her tread. The wind tore through the narrow pass like a vengeful spirit, whipping snow into a blinding veil that Naraya felt more than saw, its icy lashes stinging her cheeks and tangling in her hair. The howls converged now, a cacophony of primal fury and calculated menace, vibrating through the stone at her feet and into her bones. Eric's hand lingered on her arm, a tether of warmth amid the gathering storm, but she pulled away gently, her lunar perception unfurling like wings in the chaos. It painted the night in strokes of intent. The approaching pack, her pack, the Frostfangs, mingled with the southern hunters, their auras a tangled snarl of old grudges and fresh ambition. Betrayal's scent rode the gale, sharp as rusted iron, revealing the traitor at its heart. She stepped forward, boots sinking into the drift, the earth's tremor guiding her toward the confrontation she had long evaded. The mark at her throat burned fiercer, a crimson ember sinking with the moon's pulse overhead, its silver light filtering through clouds to cast ethereal glows on the snow she sensed as prismatic halos. Eric's breath hitched behind her, his melancholy aura laced with protective resolve. But this was her reckoning, the past clawing back to claim what it had discarded. "Naraya, wait!" he urged, voice a gravelly plea edged with the king's ethical restraint, the guilt of years unspoken in its timbre. Yet she pressed on, intuition mapping the fray. Thorn, the alpha who had exiled her, his intent a bloated storm of dominance masking fear. And woven through it, a rival's shadow, the Southern Lord's envoy, whose greed pulsed like venom in the veins. The first clash erupted with a guttural roar, the air thickening with the musk of fur and steel. Naraya halted at the pass's mouth, where the wind funneled into a roaring throat, her senses alive to the melee, claws raking snow, breaths exploding in white plumes, the wet smack of flesh yielding to fang. Her pack's voices rose in chaotic snarls, familiar cadences twisted by confusion, as southern blades sang through the frost. She saw it all through emotion's lens. Thorn's fury, a crimson blaze of territorial rage clashing against the envoy's calculated malice, a serpent's coil seeking to exploit the fray. And beneath, the traitor's flicker, one of her own, a beta scout named Garrick, whose aura reeked of sold oaths, his intent a foul bargain struck in shadowed dens for a taste of power. Naraya, Thorn's bellow cut through the din, laced with shock that curdled into scorn. She felt his approach, heavy steps crunching ice, his heat radiating like a forge's bellows. The pack fell into a ragged circle around her, their breaths a collective huff, scents of sweat and blood mingling with the pine-laced wind. Eric emerged at her side, his presence a steel bulwark, but she raised a hand, silencing his growl. This judgment was hers to wield, the Pathfinder's gift demanding she pierce the veils they hid behind. "You return like a ghost to haunt us," Thorn snarled, close enough that his spittle warmed her face, his aura a turbulent sea of dominance undercut by unease. The pack murmured, their intents a chorus of wariness and lingering disdain. Useless one, cursed sight, yet threaded with the fraying loyalty that had drawn them into this southern snare. Naraya tilted her head, her perception delving deeper, the mark flaring to reveal the web. Garrick's betrayal. A whisper to the envoy promising the Frostfang's borders for a southern alliance, all to undermine Thorn's weakening rule. The warlord's envoy laughed, a oily rumble from the shadows, his voice carrying the South's arid bite. "The blind whelp? She is the prize we seek. Her blood sings of thrones unspoken." Eric tensed, his hand brushing hers in silent vow. But Naraya stepped into the circle's heart, the snow yielding like a confessional floor. The wind howled its approval, weavando through the peaks, as if the Deusa herself stirred the gale. "You cast me out for weakness," she said, voice steady as glacial flow, carrying over the storm. "Yet blindness has shown me truths your eyes refuse." Garrick, she named him without pause, her intuition locking on his panicked spike of fear. "Your heart betrays you. Silver from southern coffers stains your loyalty, a poison you fed to our borders for scraps of glory." Gasps rippled through the pack, intense fracturing like ice under heat, shock, dawning rage, the traitor's guilt surging as a black tide. Thorn's growl deepened, turning toward the beta, but Naraya's words halted him. "And you, Alpha," she continued, her tone laced with the tragic weight of forgiveness's edge, "exiled me not from strength, but fear, of the moon's favor in one you deemed broken. The sigil binds us all, Frostfang and Iron Peak alike. The South comes not for land, but to sever the Deusa's thread, to blind the realm to its own heart. The envoy lunged then, his blade whistling through air, thick with tension, but Eric intercepted, a clash of steel and snarl that shook the snow from branches. The pack erupted, loyalties splitting in the visceral roar, fangs bared, bodies colliding in a whirlwind of blood and frost. Naraya stood amid the fray, her gift a lighthouse in the tempest, guiding strikes with whispered warnings. To your left, betrayal's blade. Her perception wove through the chaos, unveiling intents like threads pulled from a loom. Thorn's reluctant awe blooming into fierce defense, the pack's scorn transmuting to fierce allegiance as her words proved true. Garrick broke free, scrambling toward the envoy, but she sensed his desperation, the moral fracture of a soul sold too cheaply. "Mercy or war?" she called to Thorn, the question a philosophical blade, cutting to the dilemma's core. Freedom whispered in her veins, the liberty of solitude, unburdened by blood's demands. Yet love's pull, fraternal and redemptive, tugged like the moon's tide. To forgive was to chain herself to legacy. To war was to embrace power's cold throne, sacrificing the quiet courage she had forged alone. Blood sprayed warm across her skin, the metallic tang flooding her senses as Garrick fell with a gurgling cry, Thorn's jaws closing the traitor's fate. The envoy retreated into the storm, his aura a retreating shadow of thwarted greed, southern howls fading into the peaks. Silence descended, broken only by ragged breaths and the wind's mournful dirge. Thorn approached, his intent softened to something akin to reverence, the pack's circle tightening not in scorn, but solidarity. Eric's hand found hers again, his guilt's melancholy yielding to quiet pride, the bond of siblings a fragile bridge over abyss. Yet as the adrenaline ebbed, Naraya's heart clenched with the choice's weight. The other brother's howls echoed distantly, drawing nearer, promising reunion's fire. To claim her place was to wield compassion as weapon, forgiving the past's wounds to forge a future unblinded by revenge. Or to walk free, her courage a solitary flame against destiny's gale. Love not as chain, but choice. Under the moon's blood-kissed gaze, the snow drank the fallen's warmth, and Naraya stood at the precipice, the realm's fate balanced on her unseen resolve. What was true strength, if not the mercy to rebuild from ruins, or the freedom to let empires crumble alone? The night held its breath, awaiting her verdict. The snow-laden peaks loomed like silent judges as the distant howls crescendoed into a symphony of arrival, their echoes rebounding off the ice-crusted cliffs with a resonance that stirred the air's frozen heart. Naraya felt it first in her veins, the sigil's crimson pulse quickening, a tidal pull drawing the unseen threads of her bloodline taut. Eric's grip on her arm tightened, not in command, but in shared anticipation, his aura a steady forge of melancholy resolve, tempered now by the faint bloom of hope that her revelation had kindled. The pack encircled them still, breaths ragged from the fray, their intents a mosaic of awe and uncertainty. Thorn's dominance softened to wary respect, the other's scorn thawed into tentative loyalty, sense of blood and exertion hanging heavy like incense in a desecrated temple. She stepped forward into the pass's throat, the wind's roar parting like a veil before the moon's insistent gaze. Its silver light bleeding through the clouds to paint the snow in ethereal strokes she perceived as shimmering waves of intent. The howls resolved into forms, 5 more alphas emerging from the storm's maw, their presences crashing over her like avalanches of power and pain. Each bore the sigil's echo in their auras. The second, a tempest of unyielding strategy, his steps measured as the tick of a war drum. The third, a quiet inferno of protective fury, his breath carrying the faint char of battlefields long quelled. The fourth, woven with the subtle grace of diplomacy's blade, intent laced with the sorrow of broken pacts. The fifth, raw and untamed, a whirlwind of instinct scarred by isolation. And the sixth, the eldest's shadow, burdened with the philosophical weight of legacies he alone had chronicled in hidden scrolls. They halted at the circle's edge, silhouetted against the lunar glow, their collective heat a counterpoint to the frost's bite. Naraya's perception unfurled fully, the Pathfinder's gift weaving through them like moonlight-piercing storm clouds, unveiling the tapestry of their shared fracture. Flashes assaulted her. The eclipse night of their birth, a queen's defiant howl as rival shadows descended, scattering the litter to preserve the Deusa's favor. Years of forged thrones, each brother rising in exile's fire, guilt their constant companion for the sister left behind. "Naraya," the second murmured, voice like grinding stone, recognition dawning in his aura's seismic shift. The blind flame we thought extinguished. Eric moved to her side, his hand brushing hers in silent affirmation, but she raised her chin, the mark at her throat a blazing compass. "You come as kings," she said, her voice carrying over the wind's lament, steady despite the ache blooming in her chest, rejection's ghost warring with the pull of reunion. "Yet I stand as the outcast you abandoned to shadows. What redemption do you seek in blood that flows too late?" The question hung, philosophical and raw, slicing to the dilemma's core. Was this union a cure for their curses, or a chain forged from past sins? The pack shifted uneasily, Thorn's growl a low undercurrent, his intent flickering with the moral precipice of yielding authority to this newfound kin. The third brother stepped forward, his presence a wall of heat, aura radiating the ethical fire of one who had spared foes only to lose realms. "We come not to claim, but to atone," he rumbled, the words laced with the melancholy of battles won at mercy's cost. The southern warlords converge, their false moons a veil for the ancient curse they revived, the one that sundered our mother, binding our power in fragments. Your gift, Pathfinder, sees the threads they blind us to, the traitors in allied courts, the poisons in peace oaths. Without you, our union is blade without edge. His intent unfolded to her like a map of stars. Visions of iron keeps under siege. Brothers falling to ambushes born of unseen deceit, the Deusa's favor waning as guilt eroded their resolve. Naraya's heart clenched, the cold seeping deeper as intuition revealed the sacrifice's shape. To join them was to wield compassion as crown, guiding their choices through the heart's unerring sight, forgiving the exile that had honed her solitude into strength, redeeming their line through unity's fire. Yet freedom whispered fiercely, a solitary path where courage needed no throne, no blood's burden. The wind howled its dirge, carrying the faint, acrid tang of approaching southern scouts, their malice a distant thunder on the horizon. The brothers' auras pressed in, a chorus of guilt and duty, the fourth's diplomatic sorrow, pleading for the moral high ground of alliance, the fifth's untamed plea, raw with the pain of isolation mirroring her own, the sixth's quiet wisdom, unveiling scrolls' prophecies where the blind sister mended the fractured moon. Thorn interjected, his voice a thunderclap of territorial claim, intent surging with the alpha's instinct to protect what remained. "She is Frostfang, not your lost relic. If she walks your path, the pack fractures further." The circle tensed, loyalties fracturing like ice under strain, pack versus blood, power versus heart. Naraya felt the weight, her perception threading the chaos. Eric's ethical core shining as beacon, refusing to force her choice, his melancholy a vow to stand by whatever verdict she rendered. Blood sprayed anew in her mind's eye, not from battle, but the internal rift, love as proof, demanding she choose between the compassion that healed wounds or the liberty that honored her forged self. The Southern Scout's howls pierced the tension, closer now, a prelude to the realm's unraveling war. The brothers formed a protective arc, their presences syncing with Eric's, a united front, born of necessity's forge. Naraya stepped into the center, snow crunching like brittle bones underfoot, the moon's gaze a tangible pressure on her skin. "Strength is not in crowns or claws," she declared, voice rising with the storm's fury, "but in the mercy to rebuild what was cast aside, or the courage to walk unclaimed." Tears froze on her lashes, unseen but searing, as the sigil blazed, flooding her with the vision's climax. A lunar altar amid flames and blood, her hand guiding the brothers' blades, not to conquer, but to spare, forging peace from betrayal's husk. Yet the fork loomed. Embrace the union. Sacrifice solitude for redemption's flame, or turn away, letting destiny claim its toll alone. The scouts crested the ridge, shadows against the silvered sky. But Naraya's resolve hardened like frost to steel. In that visceral hush before the clash, with brothers' auras enveloping her like wings, she chose the precipice's edge, love as redemptive trial, not easy balm. The wind screamed its approval, uivando through the peaks as fangs met steel once more, her perception a guiding light in the blood-soaked night. But as the battle ignited, a deeper ache lingered. Could this rebirth heal without further loss? Or would true union demand the ultimate surrender, her heart's freedom for the realm's dawn? The moon watched, unblinking, as snow drank the first crimson drops, the choice's fire kindling toward an uncertain blaze. The clash ignited like a spark on dry tinder, the southern scouts' snarls merging with the brothers' thunderous roars, a symphony of steel and fang that rent the night asunder. Naraya stood at the heart of the fray, the snow beneath her feet churning into a crimson slush that seeped warm through her soles, its metallic tang rising sharp against the wind's feral bite. Her perception bloomed amid the chaos, a silver web threading through the storm of intents, the scouts' malice, a venomous coil of conquest, clashing against the brothers' unified resolve, their guilt-forged auras flaring like beacons in the lunar haze. Irik's presence anchored her left, his blade singing through the air with ethical precision, sparing where death loomed unnecessary. The others encircled, their powers sinking in a primal dance. Strategy, fury, grace, instinct, wisdom, each stroke a step toward the redemption they craved through her. She moved not with sight, but with the moon's unerring pulse, her voice a clarion cutting the din. "To the east, deceit flanks you," she called to the fourth brother, her intuition unveiling the scout's hidden feint, a shadow of betrayal lurking in his blade's arc. He pivoted, his diplomatic sorrow transmuting to swift mercy, disarming rather than slaying, the clang of fallen steel echoing like a vow fulfilled. The sigil at her throat blazed, its crimson warmth spreading through her limbs, syncing with the brother's marks in a resonant hum that amplified her gift. Flashes assailed her, not mere emotions, but the Deuce's weave, revealing the curse's unraveling, the ancient fracture born of their mother's bloodied eclipse, now mending as her perception guided their choices, turning war's blind rage to compassionate precision. Thorn and the Frostfangs surged into the melee, their loyalties no longer frayed, but forged anew in the fire of her truth. The Alpha's growl harmonized with the brothers, his territorial intent yielding to a greater tide, the pack's sense mingling with Iron Peak's iron and pine, unity's first fragile bloom amid the blood spray. A scout lunged at Naraya, his aura a spike of greedy triumph, blade whistling toward her unprotected side. She sidestepped by instinct, the wind's shift whispering the path, but Erik intercepted, his body a shield that took the glancing blow, fresh blood blooming hot on his already bandaged shoulder. Pain lanced through their bond, his guilt surging like a wave, atonement's price, paid in flesh for the sister he had lost. "No more shadows," Naraya whispered, her hand finding his arm, steadying him as the scouts faltered, their numbers thinning under the onslaught. Her perception pierced deeper, unveiling the envoy's distant command, a retreating thunder of thwarted ambition, but laced with a deeper peril. the warlord's true strike, not here in the pass, but at the lunar temple cradled in the peaks, where the Deuce's altar awaited the Bloodlines' convergence. The vision crystallized, flames licking ancient stones, false moons conjured to sever the sigil's thread, demanding a sacrifice to seal the curse forever. Her heart clenched, the choice's precipice sharpening to a razor's edge. Union meant stepping into that blaze, her freedom's quiet flame offered to heal the realm, or turning away, letting the brothers face the pyre alone, her courage a solitary echo in the void. The last scout fell with a gurgling howl, the snow drinking his warmth as silence descended, broken only by ragged breaths and the wind's mournful sigh. The brothers gathered close, their auras enveloping her like a cloak of starlit frost, guilt's melancholy yielding to reverent awe. The second brother's voice rumbled first, steady as mountain roots. "You see us whole, Pathfinder. The curse fractures without your light." The third nodded, his protective fire banked to embers, intent woven with the ethical vow to wield power only as mercy's tool. Thorn approached last, his dominance bowed, the pack's circle a testament to the moral shift her words had wrought, scorn transmuted to fealty, rejection's wounds cauterized by truth. Nariah traced the sigil on her throat, its pulse now a shared heartbeat, sinking with the moon's silver gaze that bathed the bloodied snow in prismatic glow. Freedom tugged, a whisper of the exile's peace she had carved from blindness's forge, unburdened, unseen, her worth proven in solitude's unyielding cold. Yet love's redemptive pull was stronger, a tide born not of reward, but trial, to surrender her isolation for the brothers' healing, guiding them through destiny's tempests with the heart's unblinded sight. Tears traced frozen paths down her cheeks, warm against the chill, as intuition unveiled the rebirth's shape. Union not as chain, but rebirth, where sacrifice cured the line's ancient curse, her courage crowning them all in compassion's light. "I choose you," she said, voice rising clear over the peaks, the words, "a vow," etched in lunar fire. "Not for thrones or blood, but to mend what the Deuce wove. Let the temple claim its due, my sight through your strength, our guilt forged to peace." Eric's hand clasped hers, his melancholy lifting like mist under dawn, the brothers' howls rising in unified chorus, a Renascimento's anthem that shook the snow from ancient pines. Thorn inclined his head, the pack's loyalty sealed in the night's hush, as they turned toward the temple's shadowed call, flames flickering in her mind's eye like beacons of awaited dawn. The wind carried them forward, Wivando blessings through the frost, blood and fire yielding to the moon's redemptive embrace. In that union, Nariah found her worth, not in sight or lineage, but in the mercy that rebuilt from ruins, courage blooming eternal beneath the eternal night. The realm stirred, awakened from despair's grip, as the sigil's light spread, a flame no curse could quench. If your heart beat alongside ours, like, comment, and subscribe, because every soul that joins our moon keeps the flame of redemption alive.